What have you called? Yeah, we will this summer.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hi. We'll probably start once we see a bit of a break in the people joining the meeting. And we are, as Matt said, we are recording. Once the presentation is over, we will host it on our YouTube and share the link. Ben, did you have a question?
I didn't. I went to click to see if the people button worked, and then the raised hand showed up, and now it won't let me lower it. There it goes. Okay, so yes, my question was, how do you lower your hand, because it won't go away? But now it is good, and I'm glad that this is all on recording, so I can look like an idiot to everyone forever for future generations. So thank you.
We were gonna erase the very beginning until we started, but now I'm thinking we should keep this part.
Yeah, exactly. So that you're all welcome. Thank you. Perfect.
We needed a laugh anyway, so this is good.
Marianne, I know we've met most everybody here, if not everybody. Do you want to maybe do introductions before I get the slides moving for you, or you think we're good just to get going?
We'll do that real quick. I think I know most of you, although there's at least one name I don't recognize. But I'm Marianne Cardwell. I am one of two deputy GIOs here at the state, and the data harvest is my baby, even though I've passed it on to Matt to do most of the work. But I'm like the grandparent at this point. I still really care about it and want to play with it when it's being nice, and give it back to him when the project is maybe crying. So, but Matt, how about you?
Yeah, nice to meet everybody that I have not yet met. Got my name inserted there. I'm Matt. I've been with the GIO for coming up on 2 years at the end of this summer. Spent most of my time working on the Indiana map migration and the new site and all of that good stuff. But got more involved with the data harvest a lot last year, helping Marianne out, and then took a new position as our data harvest subject matter expert about a little bit over a month ago. So I'll be here to help with the kind of technical components of some of your questions with the new platform and the data model and all of that good stuff, and help administer that platform. So thanks for joining us today.
And we also have a couple of folks from Datamark that have joined us on the call. So you may have seen an email, at least from Kirby. Excuse me. And we also have Matt Klaus from Datamark. So we've got GIO Matt and we've got Datamark Matt. But all right, feel free to interrupt us during the presentation and ask questions or put them in the chat. Whoever's not presenting, the other person will try to keep an eye on the chat. But we're also hoping that we'll go through the slides at a decent enough clip that there will be plenty of time for questions at the end of the presentation. So with that, I guess we'll just get started.
Sorry, that brought my email up rather than the slideshow. All right.
All right. So the agenda for today, as you can see there, we're going to give a brief overview of the program. I think the vast majority of you are pretty familiar with it, but I think it always kind of bears repeating. We'll give a timeline that's a little bit different to how we've done things in the past this year. And we'll talk about how to upload and submit your data. We'll go over the schema and I'll just especially give you the highlights of what's a little bit different. And then we'll talk about a lot of the resources that are available to everybody. So in the past, we've often started asking for data August 1st or that Monday of that first week of August. This year, we're asking to start a little bit earlier. We're asking for people to start submitting data on July 16th with a closing of August 15th. Now, for all of the phase 1 counties, which is, I believe all of you, if not most of you, on the call, we what we'll probably do is get the data out of VEP after August 15th. So that is most likely what we're aiming for. So that still gives you a couple of months to kind of play with your data and review it and hopefully resubmit it after doing some fixes on your end. Matt will talk about that a little bit later, but in more detail, but we do have 6 layers that cannot be submitted through VEP. So those 6 layers, we would like for you to submit them during that time frame of, mid-July through mid-August. As before, we will try to release the parcels first. And then the boundaries, we are hoping to have the road center lines in mid-December and then address points late January. I'm hoping some of that will happen a little bit sooner, but it's the first time we're going through this process this year a little bit differently. So we'll see. And then we'll have an updated statewide geocoder and all that documentation in February. Next. Oh, there we go. Yep, thank you. For submitting the data, so all of the data that you either provided to us this year or you provided to us in 2023 and you said it was okay to use, that's all been submitted to DataMark, and DataMark has uploaded all of that data to the VEP platform. So you should have all received some reports. If not yesterday, it would have been today or Friday. I know some of them went out on Friday, and others went out yesterday and today. And that has a lot of really helpful information. So now that that's there, you have that initial idea of where the issues might be in your data, and also some guidelines on how to maybe start, which areas to start focusing on first. We realize we're never going to get 100% perfect data. So, we appreciate any effort you can put into it. But we know it could be a lot. So definitely talk to us if you have some concerns, if you want to talk about, what should I really focus on based on the amount of time I have available. We want to work with you. Again, after August 15th, that is when we are going to start getting data out of VEP and start working through that data. And we have quite a bit of processing we do on our end after it's been uploaded to VEP. Formats, you should have all seen that in the training, but the geodatabase format, shapefile, and XML files are supported at this time. I mentioned earlier we have 6 layers that are not supported in VEP, and those are county commissioner, council, and then library, school, tax, and TIF districts. And those we would like to submit separately from the VEP platform. And to upload the data, that'll be for those non-VEP layers, that'll be similar to before. We have a Survey 123 form that is already available on our hub site. We'll ask you to fill out the information, and then you will receive an email with information on where to upload the data. This year, we're going to be trying SharePoint, OneDrive, that combination. I know we tried this option a few years ago, and at the time I had some counties that it seemed like some of the Microsoft emails were getting filtered out or would go into their junk folder. So if that's the case, again, maybe check your junk folders to make sure that you're getting that information. If it's not working, just reach out and we'll work with you on an alternative way. These are pretty small files, so you could also just email them to us if need be. But our goal this year is to use this public SharePoint site that we have available for this purpose. And as always, we really only want the information that is within your county. We don't want information from you outside of the county. And we only want existing street center lines, address data, and so forth. So if you have some historic data, I'm thinking Marion County, for example, I know that your data set includes a lot of historic streets. We don't really want that. So if you could just maybe query those out before you submit them to VEP, that would be really wonderful, so that we don't have to try to first of all, know that there's some historic data in there, and second, then try to figure out how to remove that data. So that those are kind of our 2 requests when you are uploading the data. And Matt will take you most of the way to the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we've got one more slide Marianne will cover at the end, but with that, I will keep moving ahead. I'll try to move through this all pretty quick, give a good amount of time for questions at the end and have some conversation if folks want to. So similar to the past, we do have a template kind of spreadsheet that has a crosswalk between the layer names from your data to our schema. We have a template file geodatabase available if anybody wants to load their data into that. We also this year, I just posted them this morning, have template shape files for all of the layers in there. These do not include domains, of course, but have that as an alternative if anybody does not want to or cannot use geodatabases. So these are all available. Links to them are embedded within the submit page on the hub site above the survey 123. So if anybody wants to download them and take a look, they should be accessible for you at this point. So to quickly go over some schema updates from 2023, those of you that maybe have already looked at the spreadsheet and everything know that it's really not significantly different from what we asked for last year. In general, we have moved to being kind of fully matching the current version of the NINA Next Gen 911 schema. So there were a few 911 related fields that are kind of pretty prevalent in a lot of the data that we ask for, things like the discrepancy agency ID, some dates on, when the record was last updated, when it goes into effect, and if it does expire, when it expires. One thing that's a little bit different from the NINA standard that we have implemented with our schema is rather than just one field for unit, we have split that out into a unit ID and a unit type field. So you could have unit type be like apartment or suite, and then unit ID would be your either number, your whatever field, whatever identifier for that unit differentiates it from the other addresses or sub addresses for units. We made some updates to domains, primarily removed boundary type. This was because instead of asking for one administrative boundary feature class that has everything kind of attributed separately within it, we've split that out into one unique data set per administrative boundary. Also included some additional kind of minor NINA domains, nothing that is super prevalent or widespread throughout the data. Also asking for a little bit less boundary types this year and removed our section corner request and are going to be trying to engage a little bit more directly with the county surveyors to get that data and see what we can start using it for data improvement kind of purposes. I think all of you probably are pretty familiar with a slide like this, but we did have just a kind of a brief slide showing a sub address within a unit, kind of a little bit more of a complicated address and how it's split into some of the different NINA component fields. So starting with 700 would be your address number. So just the actual numeric or integer components of the address. A half would go in your address number suffix field. East, because it's East Main Street, would go in your pre-directional for your street name. Main on its own would be the street name. Street will be the post type. And then we have mentioned unit type and unit ID. So 3A is going to be the unit type, or apartment is going to be the unit type, and then 3A will be the unit ID for that given address. Couple kind of tricks or tips on the schema stuff. So we have a couple fields up here that are a little bit less common that we see across the entire state that we just wanted to give some examples on. So first one's going to be the street name pre-type field, which I think the three on here are going to be the most common ones that we've seen kind of across the state. So you have county road, state road, US highway. Interstate might be another example, of a street name that has an actual pre-type value. Street name pre-modifiers are even less common. I think by far the most common two that we've seen would be old for something like Old Main Street, and then business for any street name that has business before the actual street name. A couple tips about the data types is, again, I mentioned that address numbers must be numeric. Within VEP, if it is not, does not only have integer values, this kind of is a critical error on data upload and some of those data pre-checks that it runs over your data when you submit it. So things like 701/2 or a range of numbers with a dash in between them, like 502 to 504, again, are not supported and are kind of critical errors within the data validation platform. Also wanted to note that having a unique numeric identifier for all of your records is going to help kind of streamline your data submission and data validation workflows. This will let you only submit, kind of append changes to your data to the platform as you make things updated. So currently this is required in VEP to be numeric. In a future release of the platform, that will change to the kind of string field for the NINA globally unique ID. But just something to keep in mind, to not have to re-upload all of your data and replace everything within the system can help speed things up a lot. Might have seen this slide last year when we did the kickoff webinar, but did have a bit of information on how the NINA globally unique ID is built. So this is a bit of a mix of some components that do not change depending on what data set or even what record you're looking at, but are pretty standard across the entire thing. So this starts with this URN emergency UID GIS string that's going to be on every record and every data set that has a NINA globally unique ID. Moves on from then, all of these are separated by colons to a layer indicator, which is different per data set, but should be the same for each record within one data set. We have a list of these different layer indicators within the template spreadsheet that I mentioned earlier, and then also have this available within NINA's documentation and standards. From there goes to a local unique ID, just has to be unique between each record, can be numeric and or text, so kind of however it works best in your system and for your needs. And then at the end, an agency identifier that represents the data provider, which in cases that we get it from the counties, which is pretty much all the time, should be kind of like the DNS name or URL for your county government or your specific agency within your county. Probably also saw these last year when Marianne and I did our kickoff, but did want to note a few of the differences between some of the A3 through A5 in the NINA standard, which would be like some of your administrative boundary fields that apply to your addresses and your street center lines. So starting with incorporated municipality, this should, per NINA, never be a null value, should always be attributed in some way, but would be the actual incorporated area that a given address or street center line is within, or left or right on the street center lines. If an address or a given side of a street segment does not fall within an incorporated area, NINA guidance is to put unincorporated or unknown, depending on kind of the specific case. And then we do want to note that this often does differ from the postal community name. So making sure that both of these fields are attributed is something that's definitely important to us. So postal community name is going to be the post office name or city name of the zip code that the data resides within, or again, left to right for the street center lines. And then really encourage this to always be attributed. Would really helps with the geocoder once that's published down the line. So yeah, even if it's not an incorporated area, having some PO name or postal community name for a given address is pretty important. So we have an example here of an address in Carmel, which does fall within the Carmel city limits. So 13262 West Letts Lane is within Carmel, but then you can see with that 46074 postal code that actually falls within the Westfield post office area. So just an example of where you might have a discrepancy between those two different fields. Where it gets, I always say, even more confusing is differentiating between the A4 and the A5 fields in the NINA standards. So this would be your unincorporated communities and your neighborhood communities. So unincorporated communities, because they don't have like a legal boundary and are not, obviously not incorporated, they might not have a really well-defined boundary. So would encourage this really to only be attributed if there's a kind of commonly known boundary for unincorporated areas within your counties. Like the census designated places might not be a perfect boundary since they are derived from the census, but kind of one one data source that we've seen kind of across the whole country, at least, that does map out unincorporated areas. Neighborhood communities are even smaller scale, typically on the scale of like a neighborhood, like a named neighborhood, a subdivision, or any other named area. Really, the guidance that we've given to folks in the past is this could be a good name for your platted subdivision for any given address. And the address that I have here is one within the near north side neighborhood of Indianapolis, 2525 North Pennsylvania Street. So, of course, this would fall within the Indianapolis Incorporated Municipality area and then have that attribute for that field. Indianapolis, like other communities in Indiana, does have kind of named neighborhoods. So that would fall within the near neighborhood, which is, all mapped out and everything. And then Douglas Park is the platted subdivision that we would encourage to be put into the neighborhood community field. So this is all important. I think really, especially in the next gen, to help differentiate addresses with like similar street names and stuff within the same PSAP, even within the same incorporated municipality. These fields can be used to differentiate one address that looks and sounds very similar to another candidate address in a different part of the locality. We are again doing gold and silver stars and get that updated on our hub site and the map and everything there. This doesn't look a ton different than it used to in the past, except for we are not asking counties to submit county boundaries to us this year, since we have a pretty decent statewide county boundary kind of solution and data set implemented. So that's been removed from at least the Silver Star section. We've updated a little bit of the fields required to get the Gold Star here, adding a little bit more fields to the kind of street name section here. So we added pre-type, pre-modifier, and pre-direction, both to the address points and the street center lines. We added unit type and unit ID if those are applicable to your data for the address points. And then incorporated municipality, which we also added left and right for the incorporated municipality fields to the street center lines. We're also looking at implementing something to give the counties that are going through the data improvement project and submitting their data through VEP a little bit of a special recognition. So probably like some kind of a certificate and a letter from our office that you could hang up if you want to, or provide to your commissioners and bosses and stuff, is something that we've been brainstorming a little bit and have plans to provide all of you. Something a little bit more concrete than just showing up your color code on the map on the hub site. So stay tuned for more information on that. So to talk about data onboarding, I think this was discussed a little bit in the training sessions that you all went through with the DataMark team, and Marianne mentioned this earlier, but did want to reiterate that in almost all cases for the counties, data that you originally submitted for the 2023 data harvest in its native schema was used to onboard the data into VEP. And so that kind of process looks like schema or field mapping between your data and the NENA NextGen 911 data model, if they're not already in pretty close alignment with each other. So all of you should have kind of saved schemas that are your default schema within the VEP platform. Do want to note that these can be modified and then resaved at any time. So as you possibly make schema updates or anything like that to your data model, that this is changeable, and we would be happy to help walk you through that process if you ever need help with it at any stage. You've all received your reports from Kirby and the DataMark team at this point. So this gives a markup geodatabase, I believe, in most cases. I think there were some that had shapefiles, if I remember right, but I have not gotten the chance to look closely through everything. Showing the actual GIS data, kind of markups for your validations, a initial data assessment report, and then a onboarding report. And those documents include some kind of general validation and data maintenance workflows and kind of proposed data maintenance plans on kind of what to prioritize and that kind of thing for your different data. So this is kind of taken from that data validation kind of workflow. We put it in a bit of a timeline format to look at kind of what we encourage you to start with. And that really first starts with the critical errors within VEP. So any geometric issues, null geometries, multi-part features, that kind of thing, getting those unique IDs generated in your data for that kind of best workflow in VEP. Any counties that do not have address ranges attributed within their road center line data, that's another really major priority that will, both for our work getting the geocoder and the statewide data built, but also for the actual validations within VEP. And then any mismatches between your data types, things like having non-numeric characters in your address number, things like that make the schema mapping and data uploading and onboarding kind of fail are definitely important. From there goes to attribute consistency. So, any double spaces, leading or trailing spaces, and blank space in your attributes, and then making sure that your address points and your road center lines are attributed consistently, and then can have that fishbone analysis run between them, which I'll talk a little bit more about in an upcoming slide. From there, go on to parcels. So checking for valid parcel identifiers, and then any mismatches between your GIS parcel data and your CAMA data, which we will be uploading once we get it from the DLGF, as your assessors submit that to the DLGF. From there, go on to parity. So, odd and even address ranges depending on what side of the road you're on. There is a post in the forum for Indiana's data improvement project on the DataMark site that was posted recently that has a kind of a parity calculator tool that for anybody that doesn't have parity built into their data already can help get that attributed fairly straightforwardly from what I've looked at. And from there, move on to legacy fields. So your MSAG and ALI related kind of legacy 911 fields, and making sure that everything matches between that and your current, more next-gen 911 enabled data. Looking then at domain validations and getting everything to fit into the kind of coded value domains that Nina has built, and then that we have built if it's not a Nina specific domain. And then at the very end of the process, encourage you to look at your topology for your data. So your boundary topology for your service areas and for your parcels, and then your road center line topology for overshoots and undershoots to make everything kind of match up nicely. Couple tips on validations that we've had some kind of initial conversations with some folks about is, you can see on the right side of the screen, we have two different images showing a fishbone analysis, which is what is kind of connecting your site structure address points to where it falls on the road center line based on the address range. And the top of these two images shows a actual address range, which is the address ranges are assigned and attributed only as house numbers exist for that range along the center line. So you can see it's pretty evenly spaced along the center line where it's matching those lines from the address point to where that address should fall based on the road center line data. When we compare that to the bottom of the two, which is using theoretical address ranges, which is going to be more of your kind of block level. So like 100 to 199 or 101 to 101 to 199, and then 102 to 198, or 100 to 198 shows you have a lot more clustering based on where the addresses are actually assigned. And you might notice you got a lot of fishbone related errors with your data if you're maintaining it as a theoretical rather than an actual address range. I think kind of the stance that our office has taken is we would prefer to have actual address ranges when possible within the road center line data, but are not, going to ask you to make all of those updates, especially if it doesn't fit the business needs and everything on how it works within your county. So these, in cases where you're not able or not willing to change or add extra attributes for an actual address range rather than theoretical, those anomalies for those fishbone kind of analysis can kind of bulk be marked as exceptions, so that when you keep uploading your data, that it's not giving you those errors moving forward. There's also some kind of unknowns that we've been talking internally, need to speak with some of the folks from the statewide 911 office and 911 board a little bit more about, but Datamark does have, or VEP does have the capability to check topology of service area boundaries, so your fire districts, EMS, and then police boundaries across different counties or PSAPs. And we still have some work to do to figure out kind of how this all looks already at the statewide next-gen 911 deployment, and then kind of if this really is a big priority for the validations at this time, which I think at this point we've kind of deemed it as not being a big priority to fix that stuff if there's already a solution, within the state 911 systems that's already it has clean topology and all of that good kind of stuff. All right, so the next few slides, I'll spend some time talking about what some of the validations within VEP actually are. So there are a handful of general validations that apply to all data that you upload, which are going to be some things like empty or null geometries. Your data has to be projected, and typically from what we've seen, always is checking for multi-part features. You might have some reasons that you do need to maintain, maybe like especially your parcel data, multi-part features sometimes. So just keep in mind that those can be marked as exceptions if you need to. And then there are a handful of kind of pre-checks that run on the data when you're uploading it into the system that really help check for any kind of critical errors that VEP would detect. So special characters, mismatches between data types, from the schema that it's expecting from what you're uploading, and then any data like layers specifically that might be missing. So uploading actually nothing into the system doesn't really work very well. Couple examples of validations for the address points would be address points missing attribution. So you can see on the top screenshot on there that the fishbone analysis couldn't be run from those two addresses to the road center line because there's not sufficient attribution on the address points to actually link it to its respective location on the center line. So first one, you can see it's missing a house number, so it doesn't know where to put it along the street center line. And on the second one, it's missing the street name field, so it doesn't actually know what street segment to assign or match that address to. Also checks for duplicate addresses, both attribute duplicates and geometric duplicates. So an attribute duplicate would be an address that doesn't share the exact same location as another address point, but that cannot be differentiated, I guess, even from the sub-address information from that other address or one or more other addresses. Also checks for addresses that are, right on top of each other and are duplicates from the geometric perspective. For road center line validations, couple ones to highlight are address range overlaps. So you can see there are that 115 Main Street address has two fishbone lines drawn to it for both of those road center line segments because the address range attribution on those center lines is overlapping each other, so it doesn't know where to put it. And then overshoots and undershoots is going to be some of that topology information I talked about in the workflow. So basically making sure that your road center line data snaps to each other and that they do share vertices and are actually connected to each other and don't overlap each other. For boundary validations, main one at the top is kind of topology kind of stuff, so gaps and overlaps. And then we also are implementing this, as I mentioned, won't come until the DLGF data has been uploaded into the VEP system, but making sure that the parcel IDs from all of your GIS parcels exist in the CAMA table when possible. And then does your CAMA parcel ID exist in the GIS data outside of maybe like your mobile home assessment and some of the stuff that's handled a little bit differently within CAMA systems. Also has cross-layer validations, which these are really focused on your fishbone analysis, like I talked about with the theoretical and actual address ranges. So does your address point map to more than one road center line? You can see the two lines, again, because of that overlapping address range for that 115 Main Street address. And then is the address point misordered along the center line? So you actually have those fishbone lines crossing over each other because the 180 and the 174 Main Street appear to be flipped along that road center line. We've made some updates to the Data Harvest Hub site since we presented to folks last year about the data harvest. So we've added some additional resources and some tools and stuff, which Marianne will talk about in a little bit. Also will include event notifications for webinars, all of that kind of stuff on the site if folks want to check it out. The URL's also been updated to a gio.in.gov URL instead of the kind of ArcGIS Online hub site URL for consistency with all of our other websites. And Marianne, when you're ready.
Yep. So you might have participated or attended the webinar what we hosted a month and a half ago or so about a toolbox that we're making available to everybody that should help you. I don't think we have a lot of folks in this room that are not splitting up their addresses into at least 4 separate fields, that prefix direction, name, type, and then suffix direction. But if you are in that boat, that toolbox has a number of tools to help you automate the splitting up of a single address field into separate address fields. It's not perfect, but it at least get you close, and then you kind of have to go and query and figure out where the errors might have been introduced. We also have some tools in there, those 2 A, B, C tools, and D, that allow you to validate and quickly fix any values in a domain field that are not actually part of the domain. I found that that's not really something you can easily do in Pro. There's no tool that I know of that lets you do that. So this one will, you basically select the data, the field, you give it the domain table, and it will look at all your values, list all the ones that are not in your domain table, and then allow you to select from a dropdown for each what the correct value should be. Then you can click run and it will fix everything for you. So it's a lot easier than doing, summarizing, comparing to the domain, then a querying, and then a mass calculate. It's that I know when I did it, I would always make a mistake. So this one's a little bit easier. And it also allows you to clean some of the string fields, some of the items that Matt mentioned earlier. If you have double spaces or leading or trailing spaces, it'll help you get rid of those. It will also replace blanks with nulls if you'd like to do that. So this toolbox is available on the website that's linked in there. If you happen to just go to the Data Harvest website and you're trying to find it, I believe it's under tips and tricks or tools. I think I called it tools. So it has a link to that toolbox, which works for Pro. I also have included some text in there that kind of gives you some tips on doing some querying and extracting the first word or things like that from your attribute data. So hopefully that'll help you as you're trying to populate some of these other fields. I have some information there on quick ways to identify maybe a county road, and then that would make it easier to populate that street pre-type field that is part of the data standard.
All right, so a couple kind of communication focused resources is I mentioned earlier, we do have a Indiana specific forum on VEP now, which is kind of exciting to see. So this will give you all the opportunity to post. We'll give our staff and the DataMark team the opportunity to post. You can follow the entire forum or just individual posts that you're interested in, which will let you get emails when there's either replies or new posts in the forum as a whole, all of that kind of stuff. So encourage you if you have questions or want to kind of collaborate with any other local government folks to check that out. And I have a couple of polls that I'm going to launch on this slide as well. We've been talking about doing at least to start weekly office hours that folks can drop in if they have specific questions for us and the DataMark staff. So we'll be holding those with folks from DataMark. So wanted to see from the group here, and I think this poll should show up now, is just to get a sense of, for those of you that might have interest in attending office hours, if there's a specific day of the week that would work best for you, and then we can see based on what the most common result is when we actually want to get those scheduled, and then get the calendar invite shared, which it's looking like Wednesday is by far the most popular one so far, which is great. And now it's tied with Thursday. I'll keep that one running for a moment, and hopefully this doesn't override the other poll. I don't do polls in Teams very often, so I'm not super sure. But this wants to see what time of day might work best for you from those. And then based on that feedback, we can actually get those on the calendar and then share those invites out. So,
And these would be in Eastern time for those of
yes.
you that are in Central. Thank you.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see that poll. Is that, where do we see that at?
Might come through in the chat.
Okay.
If you don't see it in the chat,
Oh,
let
I
me
see
know.
it. Sorry.
You do. Okay, great.
I see it. Sorry.
Give it 10 more seconds. It's looking like Wednesday from 10 to 11 is the most popular choice. So, and then of course, if there are folks that those times don't work and you do want to talk with us on Teams or something, we're always happy to schedule one-on-ones. So just don't hesitate to reach out as you need to. All right, so I think those are still running, but I will keep moving on. A pretty robust support center. Has a ticketing system. If you have any technical issues with the platform and the site and all that kind of stuff, also has a wealth of kind of educational materials and guides and all of that kind of stuff. So I think all of you got set up with that when you did your training. If anybody needs the link to get back into that, please just reach out and we can get that back over to you. The support center also has a really great rule catalog. So if you have questions on like a specific validation that you get back in your markup data or your onboarding reports, anything like that, you can go and find that individual rule, can look at what fields it's, combing through to actually run that validation, and kind of some of the more technical information on how that validation check is actually done. So would definitely encourage folks to look at that as they feel the need to. All right, so just briefly before I open it up to questions to go over next steps is, so we have 29 counties taking part in this project this year. 2025, we're hoping to have, approximately 30 more counties, and then that would leave us, somewhere between 30 and 33 counties to take part in 2026. So hoping that by the end of 2026, all counties within Indiana will have gone through this process of getting their data onboarded, getting some of that data quality kind of feedback stuff back from the VEP platform, and then have the opportunity to resubmit updated data as you have the capacity to. We've been looking into different pathways to offer funding opportunities for data improvement for local government. So I don't think we yet have any information we can still share there, but hope to have some information about that program shared with you pretty soon. I do not have a poll for this question, but did just want to kind of leave this out in the open, and folks, we can talk about this more moving forward, is kind of what resources would be most helpful for you in your work moving forward from us. So that might be guides for kind of data improvements and best practices for data maintenance. Maybe even model ordinances is something that we've heard come up a few times for addressing. And that gets into the much bigger picture on addressing, and then linking it to GIS data maintenance and all of that kind of stuff. Looking at developing possibly more tools like the ones Marianne mentioned to help work with data standardization. Of course, data improvement funding and general support from our office. And then other, so whatever, if anybody has other ideas that you think would be helpful, for the state to kind of pass along to you, I think we'd welcome that input. All right.
Aside, Matt, may I ask
Yeah,
a
go
question?
ahead.
So how many people that you've seen have, because I have a problem in our county where our unique street name table our street name alias table was actually a unique street name table which is a name of all streets that exist within the county, and not actually a street name alias table, which needs to be generated from the road centerline layer for each segment of road. Is there some sort of automation process that I don't know of that I could use to create that layer?
I don't immediately know, but I think we can look into it and see what we could come up with, for sure, Monica. I've not heard of the unique street name table versus, compared to the street name alias table before. So I think we have some probably investigating we need to do before I could
Yeah.
give you some
Mm.
guidance.
Yeah,
If
Nina
you have,
does not call it a unique street name table in
Right.
Elkhart County. I gave it that name because it was literally just a table of all of my streets with the parsing done correctly by Nina standards. But Nina unique street, or the Nina street name alias table, is actually has every single road segment identified, whereas I have it as the entire, like a name, but not a segment.
Okay.
if you have some sample data that you'd be willing to share with us, Monica, I'd love to look at it. I'm a programmer, so it might be something that wouldn't be too hard to put together, but
Okay.
sometimes it sounds simpler hearing it, and then once you see the data, it's not as simple. But unless somebody else knows of a tool that does that, maybe it's something we can look at if it's not too big of an effort.
I'm sorry.
John,
I think maybe we're overthinking it a little bit. The alias table is just supposed to be a table that ties you. You have your kind of basic street names for everything, kind of everything. Okay. Then you have, okay, well, State Road 52 when it goes through New Palestine is called Main Street. So you don't have a table of all your street names. You just have US 52 is like your main. You have a unique ID to that. You tie that ID to the table, your simple table, which has Main Street in it. You just need Main Street there. You don't have everything. You just have where the aliases are. You don't bother with anything else. So does that make sense? I mean, you don't want, you just don't want everything in your alias table. You just want the ID that it ties to, and then that whatever name is known by locally. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. So you're just using it for alternate names for
Yeah,
roads that
Yeah.
exist.
You don't need everything in there. It's much more
so
simple
you
that
do
way.
need it tied to individual
Yes.
segments.
Yes, the individual segments need to
So
be tied to that. So
not every road
Yeah.
might have an alias, right? So it's only the roads that have aliases that you
Yes,
need in the
yes.
alias table, but it does need to be by segment and not just by generic name.
Yeah, so if Main Street in New Palestine has 15 street segments, then I need to have it tied to every single unique ID for those street segments. Yes,
Thanks, John.
no problem.
And
You-
go
You
ahead.
want to have it as a normalized like alias table as well, because you can just like add it to like your road centerline data, but then you have to have a column for every single alias that you would have. So if you
Yeah,
had,
just have a relate, set it up as a
Yeah.
relate.
yeah, so a lot of places that don't have that, like I know in Huntington we used to have that. Basically, you would just add like, oh well, Main Street was also known as, Archbishop Knoll or whatever, but then you're maintaining an entire column of data that doesn't necessarily have data in it for all those other things. So then if somebody else comes along and names something else, then you have to add another column and change the schema, and it's not great. So what you would want to do is you would want to relate each segment to a one-to-one to this related alias table, so that way you could have one street segment with 60 different aliases, or 50 or 5 or 10. It doesn't matter because it's all just in one place. Then you just relate that. So that would be, if you're looking to make one, that would be your best.
All right, thanks, Ben. This slide has contact information both for Marianne and myself, also the data harvest group email that we have at the GIO. That will go to Marianne, myself, and Rick, who many of you have probably spoken to at least once from the outreach efforts he's doing. So if you have any questions after this or just moving forward, please do reach out. We'll be happy to talk more about anything that you need. And with that said, does anybody have any other questions while we're here?
Yeah, Steve, I got a question for you. I did not
Yeah.
receive a report yet.
Okay.
On the data. Now, is that data that you said that they took the 2023 data, ran it through?
Yes.
And that's what the reports are generated on. So it's not something that we would have taken our current data and run it through these systems and then got a report, right?
Yeah, a few counties did do that. Those that said that they hadn't updated, worked with their schema or their data a lot since last year. But for most cases, the 2023 data was used.
And Ben, it was sent today at last night at 9:50 p.m. So you might want to, and it came from Kirby, and the name is IN Statewide Marion VEP Delivery. Let us know if that got blocked for some reason.
Oh, and I think it was Noble who didn't seem to have it. I'll make sure we'll take a quick look, Steve, and see.
Well, all right. So do you know if it was, I guess, what information would have been maybe attached to it that could have blocked it by our Sophos internet security?
Would have been a link to like an FTP site where you can retrieve the documents and the geodatabase from.
Okay, so there wasn't any attachments to it per se, right?
There were not. No,
Okay,
there were not.
Yeah, but I
And
haven't
sorry, I
seen-
thought Ben was asking the question, not you, Steve. I was looking
No.
for Marion, not Noble.
It's okay.
For the record,
Actually-
I did receive the email, but it was late and I was tired and it looked really sketchy, so I didn't click it. But I will go click it now and download the stuff. So,
Oh,
But
boy.
Steve will follow up with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, unless
Yeah.
Kirby, I don't see Noble. Unless you have an update for Steve.
I will double check on that, guys.
Thank you.
I pulled up the email for the in-statewide Noble that delivery. It was sent Thursday, 5:30, about 5:15.
Oh,
Okay. Thanks, Rick.
thank you. I wasn't scrolling down enough in my email to see that one.
Okay.
What I'll do, Steve, we'll forward it to you, and
Okay.
maybe coming from that sender, maybe it won't get blocked or whatever happened with it.
I'll send it right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
I had a quick question too.
Yeah.
I was wondering if the GEO's office had any kind of internal discussions about TIP districts. You mentioned that was one of the layers. They can be kind of a little bit squirrely they give them as like a layer since they're all unique. All the TIP districts are tied to parcel ID.
Mhm.
It might almost be easier to have like a simple Boolean field in your parcel submittal that says like in a TIP district, yes or no. As
Yeah,
opposed to
that's a
that.
good point, because what I've seen so far, we were kind of looking at maybe trying to generate the districts off of the parcel data, and then found that based on how the county maintains it, it wasn't doable across the whole state. But
Yeah.
maybe if we ask for it in the parcel data, folks are willing to populate something like that.
Yeah, just a simple
we-
Boolean.
Yeah, we have not discussed it internally, but I think that is a good idea, and we can definitely consider it.
So are you saying that TIF district would be a yes, no field in the parcels, or would you actually put it in as whatever TIF number is recorded by ordinance?
I think we would prefer having a little bit more information than just yes or no, it's a TIF district.
But have you
Don't
looked
really
at
deal with that data much, but
Have you looked at the
Go ahead.
TIP information on Deanna Gateway?
Yes, it's been a
Okay.
bit.
Okay. I wonder if you could actually kind of join with that maybe,
Oh,
because it has a lot
Right.
of information in it.
we'll look into that, John. Thank you for
Okay.
suggesting it. Because we've really been trying not to ask for data that we can get from other sources. Because we don't, first of all, then it might be slightly different, but we also want to minimize the amount of work for all of you. You've got enough to do. So we'll look at that. Thanks.
Does anybody else have questions? If not, thank you for coming.
Oh,
I can stick around for a
sorry.
bit. Yeah, go ahead.
Wanted to add one thing for the office hours. We'll probably do them for at least the next month, and then depending on how many people show up or how helpful it is, we will continue for the month after that. But we really do want your feedback on that. If it's helpful, if it's not helpful, do we need to have it more? Do we need to have it less? This is kind of our first time trying this out, so don't hesitate to reach out with questions, comments, we really do appreciate all of that feedback because we don't know it all. So it helps to hear things from you as well.
It appears on that TIFF site there is an ID linked for the gateway, so I will put that into our data and join it.
Hey, thank you. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have questions. We'll be happy to help. But thanks again for the time today.
Thank you.
Thanks.